Thank you very much. Well, you have heard all sorts of things about the flying saucers, their purposes, and many other things. I want to bring this down to a little scientific base that you may fully understand what is taking place.
We're all familiar with certain aspects of all these different science fiction movies. It has given us and our newer, younger generations a particular mindset as far as space and space exploration and what we will or won't find there. But in this particular field, if we go back to its origins, we find an entirely different story, a story that we need to be reminded of.
Started when I was 10 years old. Beautiful, because at the time I didn't know that this woman was a space person from Venus.
What is a contactee? That's a good question, because it's one of those terms that's been turned into a pejorative in some cases. Don't pay attention to that guy, he's just a contactee.
I was taken to Mars and returned to the Earth via the fourth dimension.
A contactee is someone who claims to have had face-to-face interaction with extraterrestrials, with aliens.
This man stepped out and came directly to me. He said, "Don't be frightened, we wish you no harm. We wish you only happiness."
In general, these encounters are non-threatening. These encounters are often enlightening.
And it doesn't seem possible that you could be real human flesh. And the woman captain said, "Yes, if you don't believe so, you feel my flesh and see."
I felt a tingling in my body, which was beyond anything I'd ever experienced.
It's a fascinating part of ufology, but it's also a part of history, folklore, and popular culture as well.
When I realized that it probably couldn't have been built here, first I felt a tremendous desire to know a little bit more of the nature of this thing.
Will there be peace or war?
During the late 1940s, early 1950s in the United States, as we come out of World War II, we are in a new geopolitical situation where on the one side there's the United States, modern capitalism, liberal government, constitutional elected representatives making our laws.
After World War II, the United States was doing very well. It had become even more of a world power than it was before the war.
What we perceived was on the other side was a vast collectivism.
In 1950, men throughout the world learned to look on the brutal face of communism. From their ranks will come the saboteurs, spies, and subversives should World War III be forced upon America.
I don't think it's a coincidence that in the early 1950s, when the contact movement really began, there were deep-seated fears that the entire planet, you know, was just going to go up in one huge atomic furnace.
There was a turtle by the name of Bert, and Bert the turtle was very alert. When danger threatened him, he never got hurt. He knew just what to do. He ducked and covered.
When we see the inherent fears that everybody had, you know, these films made for school children, but when you hear the siren, you know, jump under the desk and hide.
Now, we must be ready for a new danger, the atomic bomb.
while Americans are living under the shadow of potential atomic annihilation, we're also being urged in an almost existentially important way that a new car and a new house in the suburbs are vital ways to keep the American dream alive and to combat communism.
I want a Corvette.
I thought you would.
Ooh, I want a Pontiac too.
Okay, we'll have the usual two-car garage.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence by the military-industrial complex.
For the contactees, the military-industrial complex represented, in a more spiritual sense, a combining of the worst aspects of humanity. Our greed for possessions combined with our lust for power. It was a symbol of everything wrong with America.
As one who knows that another war could utterly destroy this civilization, which has been so slowly and painfully built over thousands of years, I wish I could say tonight that a lasting peace is in sight.
Once we reinvented or rediscovered the atomic bomb, you could say a red light went off in the Cosmic Masters panels, and they said, we're going to have to start using some more of our energy to try and help mankind, lest they again go down that path and destroy themselves.
They were very concerned about our indiscriminate, irresponsible testing and continued testing, not just one, not just two, thousands upon thousands of these bombs tested both by the Americans and the Russians, which was very detrimental to this planet.
I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucers.
If you go back through the newspapers, magazines, all that going on at the time, there were lots of stories of weird things flying through the skies.
Since 1947, we have received and analyzed between 1,000 and 2,000 reports that had come to us from all kinds of sources.
A chain which looked to me like the tail of a Chinese kite, kind of weaving and
When we saw this bright, shiny object moving in an arc-like path across the sky.
Has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico.
It's being made out of aluminum, and
I've never seen it like it before since, and I'm very much puzzled as to what the thing was.
saying that President Truman has no knowledge of any secret project by this government.
Very rapidly across the sky, and then it increased the elevation angle and got small enough there.
From a southeasterly direction was this flying disc, or for want of a better name, like flying saucer.
I happened to look up and I seen this thing just about the size of a parachute without any
It is a perfectly streamlined object without wings or tail section, as it was silhouetted against the full moon.
What is your opinion of these new sightings of unidentified objects?
With all due respect to the Air Force, I believe that some of them will prove to be of interplanetary origin. During a 3-year...
So into this Cold War world stepped the contactees. And they broadcast a message to their readers, to their listeners, to their audiences, that there is a better way. There's a better way than us versus them. There's a better way than consumerism. There's a better way than violence. There's a better way than division.
So I always believed as a young person that someday someone was going to come here and it would change everything. It would be the greatest thing that's ever happened to us. And then when it began to unfold in the 50s, I thought, my God, this is incredible. It's really happening. Oh, my God. And, of course, there were those that were skeptics and there were those that were believers, you know. They've been waiting for something like this to happen for a good long while. They were looking for something to back it up with, you know, rather than just something that somebody saw.
In the Valhalla of interplanetary contactees, the late George Adamski is regarded by his followers as something of a Christopher Columbus among outer space voyagers.
You spoke to him, I have, more or less on gestures and mental telepathy as it is not thought transfer.
He did not speak,
He didn't at the time, but I have met him since, and he does speak very well English as well as in the other language.
George Van Tassel is a most unlikely person to claim to have been in touch with people from outer space.
Have you ever gone up close enough to touch one, to see what was inside?
Well, in August the 24th of 1953, I went aboard one for about 20 minutes.
Mr. King is in the studio with us to discuss work in trance, his knowledge and belief about space and the people who inhabit it.
I found I could contact intelligences from other planets.
For those who are unfamiliar with George Adamski, he was considered to be the pioneer in the field of early UFO contacts, visitations, and UFO sightings.
Before George Adamski, people just accepted the fact that occasionally other people were going to see strange objects in the sky. What Adamski did was name it and give it importance.
In the mid-30s, George established a school called the Royal Order of Tibet. And that school was dedicated to the recognition of what is inside you, not necessarily what is outside of you. He had a number of students, and a number of these students stood with him over the years. People like Lolita Johnson, who gave him his first 6-inch telescope as a gift. He set up that telescope and attached his camera and watched the skies to see if he could get some photographs. And since it was a very active area, he began to get photographs.
I proceeded to watch the sky day and night. I have seen many objects flying through space and succeeded in photographing them through my telescope.
Here at Giant Rock in California's high desert country, one of the pioneer contactees, George Van Tassel, talked to CBS News correspondent Bill Stout.
We're riding on an electrostatic magnetic ship right now on the Earth, doing 66,000 miles an hour right now in an orbit around the sun, and we're all astronauts in that respect.
Giant Rock is where George Van Tassel's earliest encounters with the so-called Space Brothers and Space Sisters occurred. It looks like something, you know, from the moon or Mars. If you go out there late at night, you really do have that kind of feeling that you're on a different planet.
Van Tassel had opened Giant Rock as an airport. He had improved it based on some of the work that had been done before by Frank Kreitzer, who had lived there beforehand.
Who actually lived underneath Giant Rock. And so Van Tassel moved his wife and daughters in there.
The first thing he did was try to improve the place so pilots come out there and buy burgers from him.
Howard Hughes used to fly his little airplane into Giant Rock to see George, and he loved his wife's burgers and apple pie.
How do you do, everybody? This is another special news release by the Aetherius Society.
Who was George King? That's the big question. Well, he was an Englishman, born in 1919. He was a very advanced being. He was a master of yoga.
And yoga being a spiritual practice, not just physical exercises.
The Aetherius Society is non-political, non-sectarian, and non-profit-making, and is classed as a religious, scientific, and educational organization.
And he also became a contact for the spiritual hierarchy of Earth and for the masters beyond Earth, extraterrestrials.
Many claim that, I think, especially nowadays, but in fact he would say that you'd have to be highly qualified in terms of your spiritual training just to be able to act as a medium for beings from other worlds because of their elevated vibration.
The greatest science on earth today is the science of metaphysics.
On November 20th, 1952, George received what we would consider to be an impression or a thought that it might be a good idea to go out towards the desert and just be present. And so he collected some friends, and they drove out and ended up at Desert Center. And as they stopped the car, they noticed a cigar-shaped craft high above the desert.
I had a feeling to stop there. We stopped. We then realized for the first time that it was a cigar-shaped type ship. Now they're known as motherships.
And they were watching this, and they noticed a bright flash off to the other side. And as they turned around and looked, they saw a craft that was very much like the one I have in my hand here, a bell-shaped craft, with its propulsion system on, so it was enveloped in this ionized air and opalescent glowing.
I saw a saucer come in, and he flew around there, and I took some pictures of him. Pretty soon, it went over the hill. I thought, well, that's it.
George is a very ordinary fellow. He doesn't make any money out of his flying saucer beliefs. But boy, he really believes them. Now, give me the details, George, because I'm never tired of hearing the details of a man who says he has seen creatures from another world.
Well, actually, Jack, this was as simple as crossing a street and getting hit by a car. After it's over, you're the victim of the circumstance. It happened on my airport, which I've operated for the last 16 years, at Giant Rock Airport, 17 miles north of Yucca Valley in California. The wife and I were sleeping out in the open in the desert because of the heat in August. I woke up and looked around, and there was a man standing there at the foot of the bed. I said, "What do you want?" He smiled at me and said, "My name is Solganda, and I would be pleased to show you our craft."
I had quite an amazing experience one Saturday morning while I was washing up some dishes. I had a voice out of this world say to me,
"Prepare yourself. You are to become the voice of interplanetary parliament." Well, I had no idea what that meant.
And that's all it said. Then it was over. And so he was left with this unmistakable voice message, which he did not understand, because he had been studying yoga for 10 years, 10 hours a day. Nothing at all to do with flying saucers or UFOs.
I decided that the only way that I could solve this mystery was to go into meditation myself. So I locked myself in the room, fully determined to stay there until I got some answer.
And in through his locked door, this great saint, this great yogi from India came through and sat down and explained what had happened and how to gain a very accurate rapport with the cosmic masters.
he is a man who is living in northern India at the moment, but he came from another planet, I believe it was Venus.
George told the others, I'm going to go up there and see what this is about. And so he went up the little river valley up there towards that area, and as he got closer, he saw a person, a young man standing there, waving to him.
So I was wondering what the man was doing out there, and it's quite a ways, and I thought there might be somebody out there that needs help. I went towards him, quite cautious, and the closer I got, the stranger feeling I had. And pretty soon I saw that he had long hair.
And that person came and approached him, and it occurred to him that he was in the presence of the occupant of the saucer craft.
He kind of a half-away smile and put his hand out to shake. Then it was a palm-to-palm contact that way, and he smiled. While we were standing there, trying to get some understanding between us, I saw a flash of lights. Then that's when I spotted that the same ship that I photographed was hiding in this little cove. We walked from where we stood to this place. It finally told me to not get too close to it.
Finally, he got into the ship after I talked to him about 45 minutes and took off. I realized the prints there he left with her, from his shoes on in the sand among these little rocks here and there.
I walked with him to a spot underneath it, and an anti-gravity beam took me up through a hole in the bottom of it. I was inside of a ship about 18 feet in diameter and roughly 10 feet high to the dome ceiling. The man took me in, explained the various things on the ship. I saw the method of power below the deck, the free energy motor running, the ship hovering there as stationary that was on a concrete foundation.
The interior walls were what looked like mother of pearl plastic. The light inside seemed to come from everywhere. The instrument panel wasn't like anything I'd ever seen before, and all of my years since 1927 in the air game.
After we got off the ship, the man who invited me aboard, who didn't look a day over 28 years of age, told me that he was over 700 years of age in our time.
Oh, come off it, George.
That's right.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My dear friend.
Your name is?
I am known as Ethereus.
There were probably a couple different strains of contacteeism. One is the more spiritual, and one that was the more nuts and bolts and the more technological.
You have the traditional, literal, physical contactee, George Adamski, meeting Orthon in the desert in California and having a telepathic conversation, and then later, going to cocktail parties on their flying saucers to Venus and everything. You also have a form of contacteeism that's related to other types of spiritualism. You see channeling, where the alien will broadcast their voice and their message through the very mouth of the contactee.
You do travel, normally, in what Mr. King has described as flying saucers when you move about space, do you?
Yes, that is quite correct.
This is the thing about Dr. King which marks him out. He stated that the whole basis of his ability to be primary terrestrial mental channel, as they called him, was his ability to attain the highest levels of meditation.
And they send their messages directly through you as a rule?
They do, yes. I think I've received more messages from the space people than any other person on Earth at the moment.
George Van Tassel one of the many Georges in the contactee movement. Yes, he saw the gleaming circular, classic flying saucers, but he also had these psychic experiences and was certainly the earliest contactee whose work and claims verged equally upon the whole psychic angle as it did as much on the nuts and bolts angle of it.
Back in 1951, they contacted me through what they call an omnibeam and through an instrument they call an adaphone.
People flew into their planes. They must have had at least 50 people down underneath on benches and stuff and chairs and whatever they could find. So everything got quiet. Pretty soon I hear Van Tassel, well, okay, we're about ready to start here. Okay, Newt, who's this guy coming in? Is he all right? See? I'm going, who the hell is he talking to? What is this, see?
What is that? Who's that calling? Oh, hello, Newt.
Van Tassel came from this technological background, so when this stuff starts happening, what do you think's going to happen? He's going to look at it through a technological lens.
Yeah, will you bring it over a little, Yeah, now the visual's clear. Yeah, can you bring that temperature down?
And I thought, what in where's the space people? What is this? And this guy next to me said, shh, it's called channeling. I said, what?
It's very mechanical. Like in the early days, they all sounded very like, almost like a machine was taking over their voice box because the way it came out and sounded like that.
From WQ9 convoy. From Mathar WQ9 convoy. I am Cortan.
I think a key to what's behind the real belief in flying saucers is most easily obtained if you look at the contact myths. There are several hundred people in the United States who claim to have had personal contact with the inhabitants of flying saucers who have landed. And if you examine these myths, you find that there's some peculiar regularities. The inhabitants of saucers are benevolent. I mean, they're really concerned for our well-being. They're omnipotent, extremely powerful, omniscient, extremely knowledgeable, and they often wear long white robes. Now, this combination is something I've heard in another context. This isn't science, this is religion.
Spirituality is an inherent part of contacteeism because you can't prove something religious, it's a faith thing.
They exist in a middle ground between the emerging mysticism of the New Age movement inherited from earlier Eastern and theosophical ideas and the growing realization that outer space was something that humanity was going to be able to explore. They appropriated Eastern mysticism, elements of Buddhism, for example, in very similar ways. Talk of ascended masters like Saint Germain, very similar to how the contactees talk about their friends from Venus or the planet Clarion.
The message is very spiritual. It's talking to in here, not out here, but out here has to hear it. It has to turn it on in order to find this.
It's not the fancy spaceships and the stories. I mean, that's what attracts people to it. It's letting go and just really getting to know who you are on the inside and connecting to your God self so that you actually start living that truth.
The aims of the Aetherius Society are spiritual ones, to spread the teachings of the Master Aetherius, Jesus, and other cosmic masters.
The Aetherius Society is a spiritual brotherhood set up to help the cosmic masters raise the vibrations of mankind. They call it the cosmic plan for the salvation and enlightenment of mankind.
The mission of the Aetherius Society is service-orientated. A program of missions which are directed at bringing peace in direct situations by cooperating directly with beings from other planets,
We believe that the major religions were all set up by cosmic masters, people like the Master Jesus, Lord Buddha, Sri Krishna. These are very evolved beings from other worlds.
There is little or no difference between mystic Hinduism, mystic Buddhism, and mystic Christianity. There were religions or statements of law given by three spacemen. Krishna came from Saturn, Buddha and Jesus came from Venus.
None of them rejected Christianity. I can't think of one. They just say, well, Jesus approves of this and he's giving us a new message through, he agrees with the Space Brothers. Maybe he was a space brother. Maybe he did come from another planet.
Mary was one of their people that they landed here. She gave birth to one of their people here. That's why he was capable of manifesting all these actions that we termed miracles.
There's a controversial parallel between the contactee movement and the domain of religion. If we look at, for example, some of the early encounters of people like Adamski and Van Tassel, they occurred out in desert locations. And the Space Brothers, they looked angelic. And they would tell people how to live their lives. They would have these laws. You can actually draw parallels between things like that and ancient biblical stories. Moses being given the Ten Commandments by a paranormal entity on the mountain isn't that much different between George Van Tassel being out in the desert at a giant rock and being given rules on how we should live.
Do you feel that you're some kind of Moses receiving a new word?
Well, I don't say that, Jack. I say that what is occurring now has occurred before. There's many records of these ships landing throughout history, clear back into Sanskrit.
The new sets of teachings are really kind of an update, or a version 2.0, shall we say, of the great teachings that have come before. But it kind of adds a layer on top of it that really couldn't have been understood back then.
A lot of the encounters people had affected them on a religious level, what we would call a religious level. So there's a lot of things going on with the subject that are not amenable to just the spiritual side or just the scientific side. It's a melding of the two.
There's an element of science, but there's also an element of religion, of spirituality, at the very least of a longing for some sort of deeper understanding of humanity's place in the cosmos.
Some people have, I believe, sort of tried to capitalize on this, flying saucers, using it as a religious motif. How do you feel about that?
Well, you see, I have nothing against no contactee of any kind. I'm not in position to judge him one way or the other. But I do not like the idea that they make a religion out of this thing. This thing belongs to the world, and it's more or less scientific approach at that.
George was extremely adamant, and so was his space contacts, that we are not creating more religions and thereby more division.
They have not come here with the idea of converting us to their beliefs or to bring up a new religion of any kind. They're not concerned with races, politics, or nations.
We believe that that the main mission of the space people is a spiritual one.
So I don't believe that at all.
He was extremely pointed that this should not be misused to create a new belief system or incorporate other belief systems.
Don't you think that our divisions of various denominations and all those different names and labeling things according to suiting our own minds that please our minds are the cause of our trouble today?
And he wrote a letter to all the original contactees where he urged them to be truthful and to unite in the message. And unfortunately, they were not all that willing to do so.
When I say spiritual, what does it convey to you? I'm not.
That don't convey nothing to me.
Oh, well then, you can't say whether you believe it or not if it doesn't convey anything to you.
For a second.
I think ultimately people are seeking a spiritual truth. Perhaps they've tried other means, religion or whatever, and they feel that they need a different answer.
There's always a maverick impulse in a lot of American society. And I think the contactee thing came out of that. There were people that didn't trust what the powers that be were doing, and I think that was the first inklings of, the Beatniks came out of that period.
These are the Beatniks, the defiant young, coming from every walk of life, wrought with suppressed emotions, and mocking the everyday course of modern society, intent on striking back as they wage a battle for their right to be heard.
When we think of the earliest forebears of the counterculture of the 1960s, we think of the Beats. We think of Kerouac, we think of Ginsberg, we think of especially William S. Burroughs. We think of William S. Burroughs a lot with UFO stuff because they show up from time to time in his works.
Well, if there's any validity in the flying saucer sightings, etc., would indicate that their technology is far in advance of ours. People have speculated that we have reached a point now where we are a danger to ourselves and perhaps to others in the cosmos.
They were very anti-authoritarian, or at least anti-establishment. They thought, we're being tracked down one way of looking at things, and it's obvious that there's lots of different ways of looking at things, and we want to know about those too.
The Beats used terms from Buddhism, discussed Buddhism. The contactees as well made use of Eastern philosophical ideas in order to frame their message in a broader spiritual way.
Maybe they were religious beatniks, maybe I can call them that. They thought, well, we've got some divine inspiration and it's coming from these people that apparently are coming from other planets. I mean, these reports of these weird things is nothing that we've made, so it must be people from other planets. And people from other planets, must be more spiritually advanced than we are, or they wouldn't be around. They would have blown themselves up by now.
People that had contact one day feel like they were given a mission. They feel they needed to make a change to the world. And obviously it comes a big concern about our planet. What are we doing to it?
The Steven Spielberg movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the protagonist, played by Richard Dreyfuss, receives a special message. In other words, he's contacted. And although it's Hollywoodized and excessively dramatized, that is essentially what was going on, I think, with contacts between UFOs and the contactees in the 50s.
This means something. It's important.
They felt that they had a role to play in this greater scheme that the ETs were signaling to them.
They have messages that they feel must be transmitted through you. What are these messages about?
Well, they stress the dangers of atomic experimentation and also turn back to what they call the laws which are God if we are to survive on this earth.
These people have never made their appearance in great numbers before in any of our wars because they knew in a gunpowder war or bow and arrow war there would be a lot of people killed and it would come to an end without any major damage.
They said, if you use your ordinary common weapons, we will do nothing to stop you.
Nevertheless, now we have the means to destroy the civilization on this planet and the planet itself. Our government has admitted that we have enough bombs stored in this country alone to annihilate everybody on the planet through radioactivity.
With each atomic explosion, the planet itself measurably slows down its rotation. And as we know, or should know, that we remain on this planet in a stable, balanced condition due to the balanced forces of nature. And if you start slowing down the rotation of the planet, you start to have opposing centrifugal force and the spinning of the core of the Earth, and you can literally tear the place apart.
We've had a very sordid history. We destroyed ourselves on another planet, and in fact even destroyed that planet. And that planet was between Jupiter and Mars, where the asteroid belt is now.
The ring of asteroids between Mars and Jupiter are pieces of a planet going around in the orbit that the planet originally traveled. It was destroyed in nuclear tests just the same as we're conducting today.
They said if we attempt to use nuclear weapons, they will shut us down, because we cannot allow this again in this system, ever. We will have no choice but to put a stop to it.
To get to the giant rock, you turn off the main highway, then you dive off into the desert. Loose sand and rat hole over a bulldozed washboard road for 16 miles. Come up over a little rise and all of a sudden...
Giant Rock, for the last 10 years, has been the Plymouth Rock of the saucer age. Saucer conventions were meeting here as far back as the pre-astronaut era of black and white television.
Back in the 50s, when George Van Tassel had his experiences, he decided to set up this yearly convention out at Giant Rock. At times, there were audiences literally in their thousands. There's a story that supposedly it was like in excess of 10,000 at one point.
One year they had 11,000 people show up in the desert for the UFO space convention so that people could actually meet with these contactees.
I was aboard a flying saucer in the Nevada desert on 11 different occasions. I was taken into this monstrous saucer by one of the men and confronted with a lady captain. Beautiful complexion, beautiful appearing woman, and peaceful people. They mean no harm to us. They come down here to investigate what's going on Earth.
There's thousands of people just sat out there in deck chairs, you know, just with their feet up, listening to the people like Van Tassel, Beth Durham, Angelucci tell their stories.
Within a matter of several days, I will myself make what might be called a flying saucer, although I don't choose to call it that because it may not respond to our controls.
The conventions were there basically as a gathering place for the movement, kind of a ground zero. It was kind of like a Burning Man for the time.
The contactee accounts did resonate with the general public. Yes, you had certain people who would stand up and say, this is just nonsense, you know, this is not true. But equally, you had a lot of people who stood up and said exactly the opposite.
Would you put up in your own words about your trip to Venus, how it started?
It started first with a very decided tingling all over my body. The tingling finally extended to the mind area, and there was a clarification of mind, such as, it's hard to believe. I seemed to become one with the entire universe.
They would come out and all gather with this basic same idea in mind that, you know, society is not the way we want it to be. But when we're here with these people and talking about these subjects, there is some hope.
I bought George Adamski's first book, Flying Saucers Have Landed. This was my Bible, just absolutely my Bible.
Desmond Leslie, or Lord Desmond Leslie, was the grandnephew of Winston Churchill, was a Spitfire pilot during the Battle of Britain and had seen a number of these craft as well.
He already had a book written that was in the publisher's hands. While he asked about this, I had sent the information, what I had. I just sent it to him, pictures and all.
The book came out in England and turned out to be a very good success.
George Adamski is lecturing all over the world to people who he perceives as being powerful and prominent. He's in Europe, he's in Mexico, he's in New Zealand.
Ladies and gentlemen, hundreds of people are being turned away now. The public interest has been far greater than any of us thought.
There was a high rate of receptivity. He was invited by Queen Juliana in the Netherlands for a private audience. And the press was extremely, shall we say, aggressive towards this.
There are hecklers, there are hang-ups, there are people who are trying to shut his appearances down. But like any true believer, this is merely evidence that he is onto something that the powers that be don't want him to talk about.
And everybody kind of followed his lead after that because he became popular, people bought his books. He was like the Elvis of the contactee movement.
This is a metaphysical breakthrough. For the first time on the physical levels of Earth, we can actually store prayer power.
Prayer power is a mission which Dr. King devised where he invented some equipment, radionic equipment, where you can store prayer.
Prayer energy can enter through this area and be arrested by the design of the battery and contained in the crystals within this battery.
What we do in the Aetheric Society is we have 30, 40, 50 people come together and they spend an hour and a half chanting mantra to direct this prayer energy and add love to it and put it into this battery. So it's a concentration of energy that can then go and do tremendous good for the aftermath of an earthquake, or we often will send this energy to a hurricane.
More than ever before, we should cooperate in this great prayer mission in order to give healing and harmony to a sick world. It needs it, you know.
Let's talk about this picture. This is the time machine.
This is a picture of the machine we're building down there. This structure is actually up. We're working now on the parts on the equipment that operate it.
People go out and look at the Integratron and they think it's an observatory. It's not. You think Integratron, it sounds like some kind of science fiction machine. And it basically was, except to Van Tassel, it wasn't science fiction. It was something he really thought would work.
Now, we're in the process right now of putting up about $55,000 worth of buildings for research to install the same apparatus they use for extension of the lifespan, rejuvenation. Because they said the only way that we can get out of this mess by ourselves is to take the people in the older years of life that have found out what is wrong with the situation and give them enough more years to straighten the mess out. Because they said in this short lifespan we live, by the time we get old enough to know anything, we kick the bucket. And it's of no value to anybody.
Now, Van Tassel's original experience, and you know Solganda, okay? So he went and got on board their ship, you know. They started talking about that they wanted him to build this building called the Integratron. It was going to be based on power systems of the UFOs. What it is basically a huge Van de Graaff generator.
There were 2 doors in it. You're supposed to be able to just walk in one door and out the other door, and while you were in there, it will recharge your cells, or at least slow down the aging process so that you could live longer.
Well, it delays the aging process in the body.
If you look at the outside, there is a little tower that goes up with and I think it actually is a propane tank on one side. It was supposed to come up out of the ground and be next to another contact, and a spark would jump between the two. And that was part of how the Integratron was supposed to work. I don't know the specifics of it.
That hollow part had a thing within it. There would be a shaft that would turn, that would drive the energy part of this device. Because when it would do it, slightly lift up like this, see? And go.
And if I was an extremely rich person, I'd have a bunch of people finish it so I could fix it and see if it worked. Who knows, maybe it does, you know? And even if it didn't make people younger, it'd be fun to watch it work. Some mad scientist thing, it would be a beautiful thing.
All of our effort on this is voluntary by many people in technical fields that contribute their effort to the project.
They all believe in flying saucers.
They all believe in flying saucers.
Of the scores of private, non-government organizations that are devoted to UFO, possibly the most active and eminent is the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena of Washington, D.C. Its director is Major Donald E. Kehoe, Annapolis graduate and a former Marine Corps pilot, author of Flying Saucers from Outer Space.
Serious, quote-unquote, UFO investigators thought that any contact with anybody in the UFO subject that had anything to do with anything spiritual, anything the contactees were saying, was basically dragging them down and making them look silly in the eyes of the public and academia and scientists and everybody they wanted to take them seriously, which hasn't changed one iota since then.
I have only been 2 or 3 cases where people, serious people, claim to have seen it. Now, of course, there are plenty of crackpots who will say they've met long-haired, golden-haired men from Venus, and one man said he married a woman from Saturn, and all that sort of thing.
These organizations had an opinion about the contactees, and it wasn't high.
They actively would speak out against contactees and tell people not to listen to them. They were all crazy. They had nothing to do with the serious study of UFOs, and that the only way they were going to get to any kind of answer about it was to catalog the stuff, measure things, take witness testimony, the same thing that's going on now.
Don't you think it would be kind of unusual for a meteor to just fly across the road and hover over there a minute and then drop to the ground?
The coming over wouldn't be bad. The hovering that would bother me.
Which really hasn't done anything, but they thought that it would get more people interested and keep serious people interested in a subject they thought was very serious. And it is very serious.
For a long time, practically no serious investigator would pay any serious attention to George Adamski, there's a whole bunch of these guys. They realized that there was a kind of cult activity here.
In response, the contactees just kept going.
As I was leaving the craft, the commander, Soltec, said, soon others of your people will be able to have an experience similar to this.
They didn't need to present the kind of proof that NICAP would need, because, let's be honest, there was no proof NICAP would accept.
But don't you think it would prove more to the American public if it could be proven that these fellows who claim that they've been talking to Venusians and Martians, if it could be proven that they're telling the truth?
It is smarter to concentrate on your factual sightings, because the minute you start in on any other angle, you're going to lose the press. Then you will start being ridiculed as having accepted contact stories.
The media generally did not take flying saucers very seriously at all.
Allentown's fairgrounds receive an unearthly visitation with thousands of cheering kids on hand, alerted in advance to expect not Martians, not Russians, but Santa, traveling by Sputnik, accompanied by Mutnik.
And so mainstream organizations tended to very quickly distance themselves from anything silly, anything outlandish, to be honest, anything fun.
To this time, there is no proof that I would consider valid scientific proof that we have been visited by spaceships.
From the beginning of UFO study, I think that the people that wanted to be serious about it used the yardstick of what serious people use, then as now, which is science. If they can say that we're doing something scientifically, then they can make a bid that people that are serious can take them seriously. And the contactees had nothing to do with anything scientific, unless it fit whatever the message they were trying to impart to people or part of whatever their shtick was.
Facts didn't matter. Expertise didn't matter. Venus was a nice place to visit, like heck it is.
We led through utter darkness at first, then into a beautiful pastel light. We arrived on the planet Venus.
Yeah, the temperature's about 700 degrees, and the atmosphere is sulfuric acid, not nice to breathe,
As we stepped out of the little ship, I was very much surprised to see that it was just as beautiful a balmy evening, all about us as we would have back in Los Angeles.
This was sort of 52 through to the late 50s. Who knows, maybe there were cities, nobody could really say. Everything changed when we got into the Sputnik era. The stories of the contactees and their trips to Mars, where you could walk around without a spacesuit on, and there were animals and houses, all that fell apart. The largely innocent days were gone.
In 1957, George Adamski received a letter on State Department letterhead from R.E. Straith.
When George got it, I was there. He read it, and he was very excited because the contents was encouragement of what he was saying in his books. And they just encouraged him to tell the American public and the world what he thought they needed to be told.
Adamski used this letter as proof positive that the federal government at very high levels was acknowledging and accepting at least some aspects of his story as true.
Who really did write the letter in the State Department? Because it was an official letterhead, and it was the official state seal embossed into the letter. Someone had brought George an LA newspaper. They gave him the front page, and in the bottom lower right half was a note that R.E. Straith of the Cultural Exchange Committee was hosting 5 students from Russia in the United States. And we've been trying to find that newspaper article ever since.
Unfortunately for Adamski, there was no R.E. Straith. Rather, there were 2 R.E. Straiths. Jim Moseley and Gray Barker, for decades, remained a force in publishing magazines, newsletters, and books, organizing conferences.
They shared an interest in the UFO subject, but they also shared an interest in like the absurd side of life.
And so in December of 1957, Moseley and Barker, with some misappropriated stationery from the State Department, set out to write a number of fake letters to various figures within the ufological movement.
The letter was sent, Adamski received it, and it was addressed to Professor Adamski. Very astutely, Jim and Gray probably realized that Adamski would promote this letter because it did massage his ego as a professor, which he wasn't at all.
No matter what the critics were saying, he felt that it was genuine. And obviously he continued to do the kind of work that he was doing.
The federal government investigated this once Adamski started talking about it, and it was that investigation by the federal government that was one of the factors that led Moseley and Barker to not talk about the Straith letter for a very long time.
And the legend is that the typewriter on which the letter was written, that Barker destroyed it, like with a sledgehammer or something like that, and then buried all the pieces in a new wall that was being built somewhere downtown.
He said, I have to tell you, he said, it's getting pretty serious. He said, the State Department officials threatened my life. They said if I did not give the letter back, that they'd find my bones bleached in the sun in the desert.
The FBI's file on George Adamski makes it clear that they visited him on a number of occasions. I mean, they really came down hard on him 2 or 3 occasions, sent agents out to sit on the couch next to him and say, you know, you'll just stop this. We're not going to put up with it anymore.
The Straith letter is significant for demonstrating the degree to which Adamski and other contactees craved the legitimacy that recognition from the State Department would bring. Sometimes their message, though potent, wasn't enough. You have to defeat the debunkers. You may not get them to believe in the Space Brothers, but you might get them to believe in your message if you can prove you're not just a liar.
Why haven't the FBI clapped you incommunicado for breaking secrets if they want to keep secret in the United States?
Well, possibly because they know this information is going to get out eventually anyway, and what I say won't make any difference.
There are many FBI files on the contactees. Some of them are shorter than others. Adamski's and Van Tassel's are pretty long.
The FBI, the Air Force Intelligence, and others came to see me. They always come down and ask me this and that, and I tell them. We sit down and talk, very friendly in every respect.
Well, people said to him, what sort of government do the aliens have? And he said words to the effect of, well, if you ask me, I think they've got a communist government. It's clear from the FBI's files that they were concerned that this man, who was now a big player on the UFO scene, his book, Flying Saucers of Land, he was selling a lot of copies, and he's inserting communism into his lecture. You can easily see how somebody, despite his kind of strange beliefs about aliens, could become a fairly significant national security figure.
Sometimes there were some concerns that some contactees might be unwitting dupes of the Soviet Union.
They were talking about everybody being the same and about a one-world government. And to the powers that be at the time, it sounded very communistic. It didn't sound very American.
It does sound an awful lot like communism.
Funny thing was, I think the contactees were very American in that way because they were very maverick in what they wanted to do. So it's funny, they're very independent and very free-thinking, but to the larger society and people in charge, that was a subversive thing.
I don't see how that can be considered to be communism. You could say we look out for our families and our relatives and our close associates and friends. Would we say that's communism because we are thinking outside of ourselves?
These are not totalitarians. These are not people who would have a lot of time for Joseph Stalin or even Nikita Khrushchev a few years later.
Let's be honest, we have never truly exhibited the phases of communism, just like we have not practiced the attributes of true democracy or any other ism for that matter.
It's utopian, it's socialist in many ways. You look at what the United Nations was trying to accomplish after World War II, and you see a lot of echoes of what the contactees said would be a good idea. Global authorities that will work to end conflict. For the contactees, however, these authorities who could end conflict were actually from other planets.
There was a bit of scrambling on some people's part on how to make this still fit. He said, if I wanted a lot less hassles, all I would have had to do is claim that they came from another solar system or galaxy. He says, but that wasn't the truth. I met people from other planets in this solar system, and I was not going to change the story simply to make it more palatable for anyone.
I wonder if perhaps you, as the director of NICAP, feel that the contact stories are damaging your case.
I think they are delaying acceptance of UFO reality by most people in the United States. And that's the one thing the Air Force is worried about. They love the contact stories because it helps them to laugh it off.
Within the wider context of ufology, the trend was more towards finding a cover-up. What did the Air Force know? And what was it hiding from the public? What does the CIA know? What do the scientists know that they aren't talking about? And the contactees don't really have a place in this world.
What is your answer to the people who are sure they're spaceships and they say that you and the Air Force are in cahoots? Well, first of all, this business about being in cahoots is just simply a downright falsehood. And if they insist that space vehicles exist, I say, oh, fine, the burden of proof is on you.
We're in the time where many Americans have no trouble at all believing that their government is capable of the most heinous and horrific acts. So why wouldn't the UFO movement be part of that cultural darkening, that increasing suspicion? Not just that government might not have our best interests at heart all the time, but they are actively working against us, preparing themselves for an end game in which they will be the only survivors.
The one thing that the Air Force has harped on right straight through this thing is that we have no physical evidence. That's the biggest lie that was ever foisted on the American public. They have the physical evidence. These things are going to come to light, and the Air Force is going to have to backtrack. There's nothing to hide. There's nothing to hide at all.
Those spokespeople that were out there putting themselves on the line were definitely being monitored by FBI, CIA.
In the United States, we developed a culture of denying and discrediting UFO believers. From the beginning, there's been a distrust, broken communication between the UFO believers and the government establishment.
You have the great materialistic conspiracy. And in what we call the lower astral realms of this earth, various pawns upon this earth are directed. Minds the like of which the ordinary man cannot conceive of are directing the policy of this earth.
The contactees tried to put on the type of paranoia that the rest of the flying saucer world seemed to exhibit.
This is a sick planet. This is a planet where the worship is in money, not in service. Where everybody looks to a result called profit, not love. This monster, the golden calf, is about to collapse. But now that the whole world operates on one money system, this won't be a national collapse or a depression. It'll be a total world money collapse.
To many of the contactee fans, it didn't gel. What happened to the optimism? Contacteeism was no longer above the fray. Contacteeism was down there trying to get a piece of the paranoid pie that was consuming ufology in the 1960s, with increasingly common tales of men in black and government cover-ups.
Because the military-industrial complex has such a hold on this planet that they defy anyone to come up with any way that will make it easier for the public to coexist on this world. It's obvious. Look around you. It's obvious. Because we're lied to. Because we're not told the truth. Because those that want to pursue the negative pathway, they hide it. They shield it. The shield is coming down. Pretty soon they won't be able to stop the avalanche of truth, the avalanche of light.
The sweetness and light of the contactees and the morally neutral lights in the sky take a darker turn.
The next big movement, I guess, in contact was the abduction scenario that became known in the 1960s, mainly because of the Barney and Betty Hill abduction.
From the early 50s onwards, we had Adamski, Van Tassel, all of these people talking about very human-looking aliens. Most of them were sort of very angelic-looking, long-haired humans.
Betty's and Barney's experience was completely different from this. I was 13 years old when Betty phoned my mother, her sister, and told her that she and my uncle had had a close encounter with a UFO in New Hampshire's White Mountains the previous evening. They had observed it for close to an hour before it descended to within 100 feet of their vehicle. Barney observed non-human entities on board the craft. They were all gray, all had very large, sort of wraparound eyes. He became terrified because he felt they were giving him a message. He felt that they had a plan that they wanted to carry out, and that that plan was to capture him like a bug in a net. Speeding down U.S. Route 3 in New Hampshire, they hear a series of beeping or buzzing sounds, and then their car stalled. And these beings started to approach. They took her out of the vehicle. They also took Barney out of the vehicle, who was in a somnambulistic state at that point. They were able to use some kind of mind control. They took samples from almost every part of their body.
To me, the abduction thing is a very personal thing and sometimes almost a very self-centered experience, whereas the contactee thing was a very communal experience. And I think that kind of reflects how people as a society interacted with each other as time went on. I mean, there was a me decade.
The world's becoming selfish. We have a military and intelligence complex that is obsessed with preserving their own power, even if it means sacrificing the American people to organ extraction by the aliens.
Whatever they're encountering is also very selfish. People were saying that all they wanted was to collect medical samples, and they didn't care how you felt about it, and they didn't care that you were scared.
They are marauders. They are dispassionate experimenters, and we are their lab rats. They're here to take things from us, whether it's knowledge, data, bodily fluids. They need semen, they need ovum, they need blood. Why do they need these things? It's never really explained well.
You can't get much more personal than that. Something coming in the middle of the night in your bed with nobody else being aware or being turned off or whatever you want to call it. That is the exact opposite of the contactee thing.
I think everybody got a little sidetracked with, when Betty and Barney Hill started with the Greys, and then it started with abductions, and then anything that was alien was all about Greys. And that was the main focus, especially with books like Communion, which was a great read, and a terrifying read, because you could be reading the book thinking, wow, they could be like right there. I remember reading that book. I said, I'm only going to read this book during the day.
And their stories of the contactees always made the contactees special. Suddenly, with the abduction phenomenon, the abductees aren't special. They're victims, picked up by the aliens for the aliens' purposes, not told great secrets, not given a message for mankind. And some of the experiences were pretty harrowing.
It's the same type of cultural reflection that the contactees were. But instead of hoping for the future, we don't see one. There is no future. There's just a blank, gray, noseless face staring into our soul.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the Benny and Barney Hill thing, and let's expound upon our possibilities here.
It's the belief of the Aetherius Society, broadly speaking, all contact with extraterrestrials and UFOs are in all ways good and spiritual. So there is no likelihood at all that they would abduct someone. It would be completely ridiculous.
Don't ask us about Greys, because they're not going to get into that. They're not going to get into these people that want to experiment and research on human beings and different things like that. No, we don't. We know it happens. We know it's still ongoing, but we don't get into this. It's very negative. We won't get into it, and they won't get into it.
These people don't abduct. They don't have to. They can walk up and meet you anywhere at their time. They do not take people aboard ships and perform medical experiments. They don't have to.
The level of the technology that our visitors from space bring would take our breath away. They can right now, from your atoms all the way through your thought process, record and register everything about you they could possibly want to know. And they can do that from the safety of space, where they don't have to jeopardize their crafts, their people, and so on and so forth.
They're hundreds of thousands of years beyond us. They don't have to do that nonsense, and they don't. And if people say they do and swear that they did, they're not telling the truth.
So do you really think they need to take you? And do they need to take thousands of you? Do you really think that you're so unique from your neighbor next door or the person over there? And my next question is, what kind of valuable scientific data do you think you're going to get from a terrified specimen? Come on. Really, people, come on.
Like any movement, whether it's, movie genres or music or anything, the contactee movement had its time. It surfaced, it rose, it flourished, and then it fell.
Howard Menger, guiding genius behind the East Coast's first interplanetary space convention, offers to show proof, undeniable proof, to back up his stories of travel to far-off planets and meeting space beings. The specimens he offered to show us, we never saw. Thus it would follow that there would be great doubt and great belief in the claims of a man who says he's gone beyond the reach of our recognized scientists to travel to the moon.
In the end, Menger would, during a radio appearance with Long John Nebel, the New York City radio host, recant in many ways. It wasn't true. It wasn't real. Please leave me alone. And he fades from the scene. Menger undermines his own story, and in doing so, provides ammunition for those within the UFO community who concentrated on undermining contactee stories as well. If Menger made it up, why haven't the rest of them?
On top of that, you had people like Dan Fry, had a big following, that is until his compound burnt down.
Shouldn't say you are a graduate engineer. You have a BA since
I am a graduate engineer in the sense that I have taken all of the studies that are required for a graduate engineer and many more.
Well, where did you get the BA, Mr. Fry?
I have not said that I had a BA.
I'm sorry, but I checked with the Library of Congress, and they say there is no St. Andrews University in London.
I'll be glad to send you a certified photostatic copy of the degree. If you could, I mean, this is something that's been done 50 times before. I mean, this is not a new thing. It may be new here.
George Adamski, certainly by the late 50s, had lost the crown that he'd got at the start of the 50s, and he just struggled on, giving lectures, writing books that really didn't get as much attention up until the point of his death.
In February 26 of 1965, the Silver Springs film was taken, in which, prior to the craft itself showing up, a small disc, a registering disc, as we call a remote control disc, came down over the property and flew between the trees. And then in the distance came one of these scout ships skipping across the top of the treetops into the same position of where the registering disc was, and then began to maneuver sideways in the same fashion.
Mrs. Madeline Rutherford, who has made her own UFO film and who credits Adamski with an assist in her first contact with Venusians.
Some of them have even been to our home. And the boys, the one came into the yard, which I filmed on the camera. There were 3 inside the ship.
This film was considered the finale for George Adamski. It was vindication of everything that he had said and worked so hard for during his lifetime, and it was given him specifically for that. He spent his last birthday in April in our house together with us, and then he turned to my father and he said to him, "I'm going to give you my briefcase of material because I will be leaving soon." And my father looked at him and said, "Well, where do you think you're going?" He says, I will be passing away shortly." George was in Silver Springs in the Maryland house when he started to have the symptoms of a heart attack. Madeline put him in the car and drove him to the hospital, and he passed away from congestive heart failure. George served in the cavalry in 1917 along the Mexican-American border, and as part of the armed services, he was eligible to be buried in Arlington.
Yeah, his health was beginning to fail. We went to next to the last convention, and we knew that it was gradually coming down, raining down to a halt.
He comes walking somewhat unsteadily up to our table. And he said, "Well, Shirley and Bob," he said, please don't tell my wife." And he said, "I've had a bad ticker for a long time, and it's just getting so painful I can hardly stand it." We were down at the post office in Santa Ana. Of course, he's feeling severe pain by this time, really severe pain. And he started to get up to go mail a letter at the post office there. Started to get up out of his seat, and she said he sat back down and sagged, and he said he just went white. And he said, "Gee, honey, I don't feel so good." Bam, that was it. He was gone. Heart attack, he was gone. Of course, just... We just felt devastated. We just felt totally devastated. Most of these people, unfortunately, are gone now. Daniel W. Fry, he's gone. I knew him from the outset. Most of these people from the very beginnings. Orfeo Angelucci, Truman Bethlehem, Calvin Gervin, George Adamski, Dana Howard, Bessie Arthur, Reinhold Schmidt, Frank Stranges. Well, I could go on and on and on and on about all these people that were there, you know. I'm one of the last of the so-called Mohegans. I hope you'll let me stay around a while.
The contactees didn't disappear. They didn't vanish. But they did shrink, and their reach diminished. They occupied their own slightly silly, slightly dated corner of the flying saucer world.
It had happened during daylight and just after the sun had come up. Somebody was in a camper there right next to it on the opposite side, and they said that they thought there was an earthquake, and then they noticed there was dust everywhere. They walked around the rock just to see what had happened, and this huge chunk had fallen off.
There's an interesting story surrounding Giant Rock, which comes from the ancient indigenous people of the area. They believed that one day Giant Rock would shatter, and it would sort of denote the beginning of one era and the ending of another.
Bureau of Land Management, when they took it over, they bulldozed boulders and debris and dirt down in there, filled it all up. There's nothing there. It's, you know, there's people out there partying and doing whatever they're doing.
You find thousands of people willing to go to a contactee convention back then, and today you still get a respectable crowd, but it's very much nostalgia driven.
It had a carnival-like atmosphere. In some respects, it's like what's going on right here in Roswell.
Yeah. It was serious, and yet it had an element of celebration. Individuals who believed the same thing getting together and celebrating the fact that they had a unique perspective on the universe.
Been a couple different events like this before, and just the gathering of a bunch of people.
It demonstrates how the field has changed, not just in the subject matters under discussion, but the number of people that are willing to travel to conferences.
I heard about the George Adamski case when I was in high school, and I haven't looked back.
I believe definitely they've had contact. Absolutely. I mean, without a shadow of a doubt.
Ancient astronauts and ancient archaeology
really fascinates me.
You have folks coming together, there's parades, there's music, the people dress up in costumes, but all the while in the background is this core essential feeling that ETs do exist, that they have made contact with us.
I just think that the world, well, the universe is so big that it would seem stupid that we're the only people, the only species here.
And I wonder how much has really changed because you have the media obviously coming to take reports of what's going on here. And then again, a lot of it is not maybe taken as serious as it should be because they focus on the carnival. Gives that whole twisted disrespect to ufology. Serious research.
UFO research does not seem to receive a high level of credibility in the media in general, especially in the mass media. So UFO researchers a lot of time are grateful for any sort of attention they receive. Even the media that kind of snickers, it helps to draw attention to the UFO phenomenon, which is what researchers ultimately would like more of.
Back then in the 50s, what Van Tassel was doing, it was more like a movement. Jim Moseley said to me, he kind of viewed the Van Tassel era with these conferences out in the desert and thousands of people with the, the whole flower power hippie movement of the mid to late 60s, where you had an entire culture of people with a shared world view getting together at concerts, Woodstock, things like that.
Growing up in the 60s, I read all the books about UFO sightings. So I was very much impacted by the writings of the people who spun out of the contactee movement. They impacted our literature, our television, our movies.
I feel something horrible's going to happen to you.
We've had very few films that were positive messages, and I think Steven Spielberg made them. So what we want to do is get back to the correct consciousness, not into the negative consciousness, because there's so many people who are living in fear and thinking the world's going to end tomorrow. It's to put this back out so that everybody sort of relives what happened back in those days.
George is the kind of person that you feel you've always known, a real friend. And he was really interested in what I had to say, and I was certainly interested in what he had to say. So we got along very, very well, and I used to go up and see him most every weekend when I didn't have to study.
Alan, after so many years, since 1957, over 50 years, you're back here in Palomar Gardens, or Oak Knoll as it's known now. As we round the corner here, Alan, and we look between the trees, which has to be developed now into a campground area, on the far side over there is where the bungalows were built for the permanent residents here on the property. And they worked unilaterally, for lack of a better word, communally, in order to get the chores done. Some did some gardening, some other one did some cleaning up. It was basically what you would do at home with your own family.
Right, sure. George said, "Would you like to use my 6-inch telescope?" I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." I saw a flash go by the eyepiece, and I looked up quickly and saw a blue-white streak at treetop level from my right to my left. And a huge flare-up of bright blue-white light appeared and then collapsed down, no sound, around an elliptical shape. But I knew what it was. It was a spacecraft. I wasn't afraid. And I felt compelled to walk over and say hello to these people. Well, just behind me was a pathway that led to the cafe, and 2 women and 2 men had just come out. The women started to scream, "There's a UFO on the ground." And they wouldn't stop screaming.
We're standing pretty much right in the general area where this scout ship or this bell-shaped saucer touched down, a foot or so off the ground, because as we talked earlier...
The witnesses were saying there's a UFO on the ground.
On the ground. From this distance, it would look
there,
like it.
where they were, it appeared to be on the ground.
Right.
So I tried to get over to the UFO, and I got within 100 yards of the ship. You could hear it hum softly, and then it started to increase in frequency, the hum, and got out of my audio range. I couldn't hear it, and it began to get very, very bright, and it rose straight up. And when it got to be about the size of the stars in the star field up above, and it stopped for a minute, and then it shot over toward San Diego, disappeared. I was pretty excited about the whole thing, so I went in to talk to George, who was talking with friends, and I told him what had happened, and he just smiled, sitting there at the table, drumming his fingers, and he said, "Well, I was wondering what all that ruckus was about outside."
A nice straight shot up into the heavens as well as you depart this area.
Up, yep.
We feel a great kinship towards all people who are spiritual and trying to help others, because that's the essence of why we're on Earth, is to help each other. We hold a peace pilgrimage every year on Mount Baldy, where a number of different faiths come together to Mount Baldy to send out peace and love for the world. They may realize that within them it doesn't matter if you're a Christian or Buddhist or an Aetherius Society member or an atheist. It doesn't matter as long as you are helping others, serving others. Some of the most wonderful people that you ever want to meet are Orthodox religious people. They probably wouldn't agree with our philosophy, but what they're doing, and I hope that they would think what we're doing, is trying to better the world.
If you're into UFOs, you've got to see Giant Rock, you've got to see the Integratron, you've got to see where all this went down, the encounters, the conferences. There is a sense of history. There's a sense of something bigger going on. You know, it makes the hairs stand up a little bit on your arms the first time, wow, I'm at Giant Rock. But you get this sort of eerie sense of loss of a time that's long gone and that won't come back.
As we look back through the pages of history, we can see a certain pattern of events, a gradually evolving pattern which is reaching a peak today, but will reach its climax in the near future. The old order upon Earth is gradually changing. This change, brought about by man's groping towards his greater realizations, will bring a new dawn, a new age of enlightenment to Earth.
It would be easy, foolish, I think, to deride Mr. King, who, if nothing else, is absolutely sincere. Because what Mr. King is really doing, perhaps through what may well be total delusion, is nevertheless uttering, in one way, in a symbolic form, the cry of anxiety that divides our world, that our scientific interest has outrun our wisdom and our humanity in some respects, and we're afraid that it may outrun our existence.
Now, if you don't want to know what their message is, you've just heard it. This is what they're coming here for. This is truth. It isn't hidden. It doesn't have any barriers. Someday we will come to that stage where we'll be open to each other. God, what a day that will be. Because there won't be anything hidden. There won't have a need to be. We'll come to that time in our evolution of what we are and who we are.
The message from the space people is pretty much, hey, Earthman, you've known for a long time what's right and what's wrong. And your history tells us what you've been doing repeatedly. Why don't you wake up? But they're nice about it. We have to go at our own speed. And we take 2 steps forward and 5 back, but we should get there.
Who are we? Why are we here? Where are we? What is our place? The contactees answered many of those questions. Where are we? We're on Earth. What does that mean to us? We are a part of something bigger. Not just locally, nationally, internationally. We are a part of something galactically, if we choose to be.
This phenomena that's taking place today is as old as our history, as our civilization. This isn't anything new that's occurring. It's something that's being continued in another time of crisis when conditions affecting the people of this planet are reaching a point where somebody has to take care of the situation.
I think it's important we remember the past. I think it's important we remember the contactee movement. Skeptics or believers or people somewhere in between should acquaint themselves with the movement, with the stories, because like it or not, it was a part of ufology and it always will be a part of ufology.
George displayed great courage against quite high odds because the changes that needed to occur on this world were slowly slipping out of our hands, and very few people were willing to stand up for the truth when it really counts. And regardless of what else people may have heard about George, ultimately that is the historical judge of who and what he was.
How can you be subversive anymore in that way? You can't. I don't know how you're subversive now. How are people subversive now? Probably by unplugging from everything and not being connected in the way that we're told to be connected. I think that's the only revolutionary act left, practically, is to go off the grid.
Go live under a rock.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Go live under a rock.